everyone, and welcome to Hyphn's DE&I QuickVids series, where we will be sharing essential information to help us all be better allies in diversity, equity, and inclusion. I'm Lisa. I'm part of the design team and the DE&I champions team, and my pronouns are she, her, and hers.
Hi, my name is McKenna. I'm on our DE&I champions team and our design team. My pronouns are she, her, hers.
And I am Molly. I'm here with our consulting team at Hyphen. I'm also a part of our DE&I core group, and my pronouns are she, her, and hers.
As Molly and McKenna mentioned, we are part of the DE&I champions team here at Hyphen, and we are by no means experts in this field. However, as we're learning, we felt it was important to pass this information along, and we're really excited to share with you our first two videos, this being the second of our LGBTQ community. So as I mentioned, this is our second video. The first video, we covered the basis on sexual orientation, or who you love. And in this video, we will be covering gender identity, who you are. I also wanted to give a special shout out to Johnny Humphrey with Coronet at www.coronetglobal.org. So let's get started. So why we're doing this all together at Hyphen is through the sharing of this information, we're building inclusivity into the Hyphen community. You need to take the time to recognize the privilege in having the ability to move through life without being misidentified. We want everyone to have the same experience and opportunity to be valued as their most authentic selves without having to challenge other people's assumptions about them. We want everyone to feel comfortable to come as their authentic self to Hyphen.
So like Lisa mentioned, we want to create a more inclusive environment. We want people to show up as their full selves, and we want to avoid any misidentifications. So to help us learn these terms, we want to go through a few today with you. And like she just mentioned, gender identity is who you are. Sexual orientation is who you love. So to start, we have gender identity, or GI. And this describes the internal sense of one's own gender. For example, male, female, both, or neither. This may correlate with a person's biological sex assigned at birth, or it can differ from it. This is not visible to others. T stands for transgender, an umbrella term for people whose gender identity and/or expression is different from cultural expectations based on the sex they were assigned at birth. C stands for cisgender. It describes people whose internal sense of gender matches their biological sex assigned at birth. And GNB stands for gender non-binary. This describes a spectrum of gender identities that are not exclusively masculine or feminine, identities that are outside of the gender binary. These identities may fall under transgender umbrella. It's important to note that people start to identify with their gender identity at the young age of a toddler. Gender identity is something we come to figure out for ourselves. It's something we're curious about, which is why it starts so young. Please note that we should not assume if someone identifies as non-binary that they also identify as transgender. GQ stands for genderqueer. This describes a gender identity label often used by people who do not identify with the binary of a man or a woman, an umbrella term for many gender diverse, non-conforming, or non-binary identities. T stands for two-spirit, a modern pan-Indian umbrella term used by some indigenous North American to describe Native people fulfilling a traditional third gender or a gender variant ceremonial role within their cultures. Q stands for queer or questioning. Queer is an umbrella term for people who don't identify or fit society's expectations about gender or sexuality. Questioning refers to someone who is exploring with their gender identity. Questioning as it relates to gender identity may not get the support and resources when people are young toddlers trying to connect with their identity. It may be suppressed at a young age. So the questioning may come later in life when they have the resources, the safety, and the independence to explore this. GE stands for gender expression. It describes how we represent or express our gender identity to others, often through behavior, clothing, hairstyles, voice, or body characteristics. It's what you see and show others. GD stands for gender diverse or gender diversity, an umbrella term used to describe an array of labels that may apply with their gender identity, expression, or even perception that do not conform to the norms, roles, or stereotypes others expect. BS stands for biological sex. This is a medical term referring to the chromosomal, hormonal, and anatomical characteristics that are used to classify an individual as female, male, or intersex, also known as biological sex assigned at birth, often confused with gender. I stands for intersex. This is a term for individuals born with any of several variations in sex characteristics, including chromosomes, gonads, sex hormones, or genitals that do not fit the typical definitions of a male or female bodies. Please know that hermaphrodite is an inaccurate and an inappropriate term used to describe someone. That is used to describe things that are organisms that can reproduce themselves independently. When we're describing people, we use the word intersex because they're not an organism, they're people. So please, please, please keep this in mind.
Thanks, McKenna, for sharing those with us. So now that we have a better understanding around the different terms as it relates to gender identity, important to talk about cisnormativity. And cisnormativity is simply the assumption that everyone is cisgender and that cisgender is superior to all other gender identities. And just to remind you, cisgender is just simply people whose internal sense of gender identity matches the biological sex that they were assigned at birth, so male and female. Often included in this concept is a level of gender normativity and assumptions about gender roles and what certain genders should and shouldn't do and the roles that they should take. Also includes the assumption that individuals should identify based on their biological sex and doesn't allow for understanding on how gender identity may or may not align with that biological sex that was assigned at birth. So what happens when a person doesn't identify with the gender that they were assigned at birth, i.e. when a person is not cisgender? So an individual may go through a process that we call gender transition, and that simply means that a person starts to live according to their gender identity rather than the gender that they were assigned at birth. A transition, gender transition, may or may not include any of the following. So it might include a name change or a pronoun change, hormonal replacement therapy, or medical transition to get them more in line with the gender that they identify with. And each person's journey is entirely different and unique and private, and not all transgender people will ultimately transition. It might be an experience that they leave to themselves. And so let's talk about pronouns and why it's important to understand what pronouns are and why we want to share them. Simply put, you can't always know what someone's pronouns are just by looking at them. So asking and correctly using someone's pronouns is one of the most basic ways to show your respect for their gender identity and for them as people. So think about your pronouns and how you might feel if someone labeled you differently. So what you might have felt when someone is referred to as the wrong pronoun is that it can make them feel disrespected, invalid, dismissed, and alienated, and often all of the above. So when we think about mislabeling, really it's a privilege to not have to worry about what pronoun someone's going to assume for you based on how they perceive your gender. So if you have this privilege, sharing your pronouns can help let others know that you welcome inclusivity and that there is a safe space to share if they feel comfortable to do so. And to that end, someone may not be ready to share their pronouns. So we should never pressure someone to share if they're not forthcoming about it. Some additional information on pronouns. We've all heard, the most commonly used pronouns are she, her, hers, and he, him, his. There are so many more. The most commonly used gender neutral pronouns are they, them, theirs. And to put that in an example, Shay ate their food because they were hungry. A great way to share your pronouns would be, hi, I'm Billy. I go by she, her, hers, and I'd love to know more about you as well. And it's possible that you might offend somebody. This is still new conversation for us and we're learning. And if you do, simply, I'm sorry to offend you. I wanted to be respectful and I didn't want to make any assumptions. And number one goal is that you simply refer to that person by their name if you're not sure what those pronouns are. And your second best bet is go ahead and use gender neutral pronouns such as they, them, theirs, if that person hasn't explicitly told you what the pronouns are that they identify with.
So we also wanted to share some best practice examples of how we can be more inclusive to others. So for example, if someone says, we want to do a better job of being supportive of our blank colleagues, homosexual or gay and or lesbian. And the correct answer is gay and or lesbian. The term homosexual often connotates a medical diagnosis or a discomfort with gay or lesbian people.
Another example is we have a blank executive leading our organization, and the choices are transgendered or a gay, lesbian, bisexual, or transgender person. And the correct answer is a gay, lesbian, bisexual, transgender person, because transgender are adjectives that describe a person or group. So back to what McKenna said earlier, we never want to say transgendered with the ED at the end.
Another example is this group is open to blank and blank people, options being transgender people and normal people, or transgender people and cisgender people. And simply put, it would be transgender people and cisgender people. We don't ever want to say normal because that signifies that the opposite of that is abnormal, which is stigmatizing and not the right way to refer to any people.
Another example is good morning, blank. We'll get started in a few minutes. Ladies and gentlemen, or guys, or everyone, folks, or you all. So hopefully this is an obvious answer. It should be everyone, folks, you all, or y'all. We want to move away from binary language because we want to be more inclusive of people of all genders in our community.
Another example, I just saw a blank rescue a person from a burning car. Our options are fireman or firefighter. In this situation and all situations like this, we want to use firefighter because we want to avoid saying terms like mailman, fireman that are gender specific, because all genders do these types of jobs.
Another one for you is, I'm not sure how blank identifies, and the options are how it identifies or how they identify. And in this case, you want to say they. It is referring to an inanimate object or a thing and not a person.
And last but not least, I feel honored that Steve shared his blank with me: sexual gender preference or lifestyle, or sexual orientation or gender identity. The correct answer here is sexual orientation or gender identity. A person's sexuality or gender is not a choice or a hobby or a lifestyle. It's who they are and who they love. So a part of learning all these things, and as much effort as it takes to do so, we also need to put effort into unlearning other things. So we want you to think about the terms listed below and how they might be discriminatory or offensive to different communities around us. So for example, blind spot, powwow, spirit animal, so gay, crazy, queer, sexual preference, lifestyle, cisgendered, and transgendered are not okay. Cisgender is okay, cisgendered, ED is not. Same with transgender versus transgendered, ED. This is not a label, it is who we are as people. This isn't a choice, it's who they are to the core, not a moment in time. So please remember that.
So it's important to remember to be the best ally that you can. And here are some tips and tricks that will help us guide us along the way. So we're not expected to be an expert and know everything about the transgender and gender diverse communities.
However, you are expected to take the initiative to learn about the transgender and gender diverse communities.
And just be sure that you're there to support and most importantly, to listen.
And just know that each transgender or gender diverse person's experience is different. So just don't make any assumptions that you know all about their experience. Let them share that with you if they choose to. Right. Thank you so much, everyone, for taking the time to join us. And if you have any questions or comments, please feel free to reach out to your manager or the DE&I core team at deicore@hyphen.com. And have a sunny day. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, everyone.